The dead travel fast, apparently. But what about bad movies? I guess we'll find out. Here are 19 reasons to watch Riding the Bullet. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Dave Musson, at Dave Musson on Instagram, and this is the place where I talk to you about all things Stephen King. Do check the links in the description to find my fiction, my newsletter, the Constant Writers podcast, and loads more stuff. But most of all, thank you so much for checking out this video. I hope you enjoy it. So this time we're continuing our march through 2004, and we're up to the Mick Garris-directed adaptation of Riding the Bullet, which is based on the 2000 novella by Stephen King of the same name, which was eventually collected in Everything's Eventual from 2002, which you can check out my reasons to read, but of course was originally released as an ebook. Now, this movie stars David Arquette, Jonathan Jackson, Barbara Hershey, and plenty more people. Honestly, it ain't great, but it's kind of worth talking about, and hey, we've got to tick them all off, right? So that's what we're going to do in this video. Now, if you're coming into this worried about possible spoilers, don't be. Anything I say here that might ruin a first time watch, I will cluster behind a spoiler alert, so at that point you can just skip ahead to the outro using the timestamp in the description below. Now, if you're looking to watch Riding the Bullet either for the first time or as a rewatch, well, if you're in the UK, hard luck. It doesn't appear to be anywhere at the time of recording. In the US though, you can watch it for free with ads on a bunch of places, including Pluto, Plex, Tubi, and like I say, plenty more sites beyond that. Okay, let's do this. We're finally at the front of the line. Here are 19 reasons to watch Riding the Bullet. So then, headline reason to watch this one. It's David Arquette. By a long shot. He is a shining light in an otherwise bloated pile of crap. I will talk more about David Arquette a little bit later in this list, but for now, just know he is the reason you should come in and watch it. And yes, it's a bad movie, but he is good enough for you to still come and watch the movie. Like, in a word, he is great. Boo! I suppose a secondary reason to watch this is that it is not a serious film. You do not need to engage your brain much to get something out of this. You can pretty much just push play and zone out for the duration of this movie and still get some entertainment value from this. How can I say this with such confidence? Well, I can say it with such confidence because in the first 10 minutes of this movie, we have a scene where the Grim Reaper appears, takes a spliff out of the hand of our main character, takes a hit on that joint, and then tells our main character to kill himself. No amount of sentimentality or rose-tinted filters after that moment is clawing back this movie from there.
Good idea, Alan.
Not only do we get the stoner death thing, we also get a random naked woman in the first 5 minutes for no real reason other than to give Matt Frewer a bit of a cameo part. And I like seeing Matt Frewer, he's great, but also this scene, nah, not needed. I think that kind of highlights the main problem with this film, is that Mick Garris clearly wanted to make something a bit more meaningful, but he also couldn't help himself in terms of leaning on all the stuff that he is known for and that he is good at, all the jump scares, all the campy stuff. But this story is more complex than that. If you remember the novella, it's one of those stories that King wrote to try and process his own feelings of losing his own mother when he was a young man. And there's a lot of guilt and there's a lot of dark stuff in that narrative. And to be fair to this movie, it does try and capture that. And in moments, it does do a good job of reflecting the huge dilemma of our main character and all of these conflicting feelings. But they're so interspersed with all these random moments of Mick Garris just fun that it just doesn't come across as serious at all. There's so many cutaways, there's so many jump scares, there's so many fake outs. It's just, you can't follow it down that path of where it wants to go, hitting those emotional beats. So what's the hook here? Well, it's very similar to the novella. We have our main character, Alan Parker, who is a student up at the University of Maine. He gets a phone call saying his mum is in hospital because she's had a stroke, and he decides he needs to get home to see her. So rather than waiting till the weekend, he decides to hitchhike back that very night. And ultimately, he ends up hitchhiking with a guy from beyond the grave who forces Alan into making a quite horrible, complex decision. It's a massive, classic dilemma story told through the lens of a spooky, ooky ghost story. And it's kind of fun, even if it's a bad movie. So you might be wondering, well, what's the bullet? You haven't mentioned a gun or anything yet. And yeah, good question. The bullet, like in the book, is a roller coaster at a theme park that young Alan got to the front of the line for and then completely bailed, chickened out, would not go on it. To be honest, I never really understood it as a metaphor, if it was trying to be a metaphor in the book, and it doesn't really work in the movie here either. Okay, let's jump into the cast. We'll start with Jonathan Jackson, who plays our lead, Alan Parker. And bear in mind, this movie, unlike the book, the movie is set in 1969. But Alan Parker, they seem to make no effort at all to make him look like he's from 1969. Like, he couldn't look more 2004 if he tried, at least in my opinion. As for his performance, meh. So Barbara Hershey as Alan's mum, Jean, is okay. There's definitely a kind of familial chemistry that does feel real. But this character just doesn't have the same presence as Alan's mum does in the book version. And I'm not just saying that because, surprise, surprise, Stephen King wrote the mum as being obese. No, it's not that kind of presence. It's more the character in the book has some spunk about her that's just really lacking on screen. Although not lacking as much as Erika Christensen's portrayal of Alan's girlfriend, Jessica, who is just bland as anything.
That was a stupid fucking thing to do.
Thank goodness then for David Arquette as George Staub. He is the driver from beyond the grave who picks up Alan and gives him the ultimate dilemma. Who's going to die, Alan or Alan's mum? Now this performance is just peak David Arquette. It's scary, it's funny, it's campy, and really it's just a joy to behold. He brings a much needed star quality to an otherwise bloated piece of dross.
Come on, you can do better than that.
So lastly, before spoilers, it's no surprise at all that this one flopped in cinemas. It's kind of a surprise it got in cinemas in the first place. It raked in about $200,000 total, which in the movies business is absolutely nothing. Now if this had been a 20-minute section in something like Creepshow, this would have been great. But as I've already mentioned, it's just too bloated. The padding that Mick Garris has done to get this to feature film length, I don't know, just feels like some really unfortunate choices. Like I said earlier, so many cutaways and fake outs. I saw somebody comment online, it's like an episode of Family Guy. And I can see that, you know, you just getting into one little bit and then we cut away to a flashback or a thing over here or a thing over here. The scenes that have been added that weren't in the story that are unnecessary. And it's just a slog. It's too long as well. It's still worth watching for David Arquette. He is that good in this. But the movie itself is not good.
Every Halloween when the moon is full and the wind is high, you might see George Staub on Old Ridge Road looking for souls like yours.
Okay, from this point onwards, I'm going to be mentioning a few things that might ruin a first-time watch, so consider this your spoiler alert. If you want to skip ahead, find the timestamp to the outro in the description and I will see you there. Otherwise, stick around because I've got a few more reasons for you to watch Riding the Bullet coming right up. Okay, one of the big changes from the novella here is that this was set in 1969 instead of the on-page version being in the late 90s, early noughts. And this being set in 1969 just adds absolutely nothing to the story. And to be honest, you wouldn't know unless they'd flashed it up right at the start. Like, the detailing is just not there. There's a scene with a hippie that kind of makes you think, oh, okay, this might be late 60s. But other than that, there seems to be very little effort made at all to make people look like they were from 1969. It's just a odd choice that does nothing for it whatsoever. Actually, sticking on that change in period, one thing it does give us, and it's not a good thing, is the scene where Alan and his roommates are talking about going to see John Lennon, and then they go on, one of the characters gives this list of basically all the famous rock stars who died young, and talking about, oh, I can't imagine a world without any of those. I mean, it's one of the most contrived bits of crappy script writing I've yet to come across. I was literally shouting at my screen, no, no, when it was coming through. Just, it almost felt like the movie was set in 1969 purely for that terrible scene.
You know what's gonna be weird?
What?
When they get old. What's it gonna be like when Lennon and Hendrix and Janis and Jim Morrison and all the gods of rock and roll are like old and fat and bald and shit?
It'll be a world I don't want to live in.
Amen, brother.
In fact, the John Lennon thing was something Garris was clearly into. He wanted to use the song Instant Karma, which, as a side point, features the line "We All Shine On," which was an inspiration for The Shining, and of course Mick Garris did the Shining miniseries, blah blah blah, lots of King links there. But Garris wanted to use Instant Karma, actually got permission from Yoko Ono to use it, but it would have cost them $500,000, which was more than anything else on the movie, and as we already know, was almost double what the movie made, so they decided not to go with it. And yet they still kept these John Lennon references at the end of the movie with a little nod to "We All Shine On," which makes no fucking sense. Okay, enough negativity. How about some of the moments that I did enjoy, besides the reefer smoking Grim Reaper? I really like how throughout the film we see George Staub's car, that red and white Plymouth Fury. We just keep seeing it pop up. If you're paying attention, you keep spotting it, and it's creepy. It's probably one of the only things in this movie that is creepy, because you're like, why do I keep seeing this car?
Oh, asshole!
I also enjoyed where we see under George's hat. But I guess my favourite scene is probably the chase scene around Thrill Village, the theme park. It's actually totally unnecessary and not in the book, but it's kind of fun as well, so I'll allow it.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
As for my favourite line, it's a tough ask because not a great script, but when you're watching a movie and you have a crow staring at your main character and then saying, "What the fuck are you looking at?" I mean, that wins, right?
What the fuck are you looking at?
Right, on to connections with other King works and King Easter eggs. It's a Mick Garris thing, so strap in, there's quite a few. Mick Garris, obviously. He did Sleepwalkers, The Shining miniseries, The Stand, Quicksilver Highway. He would go on to do Desperation and Bag of Bones. And of course, with Mick Garris comes Matt Frewer, Cynthia Garris, and Nicholas Pike doing the music. They generally are in all of those in at least some capacity. As it happens, I also found out this week that Nicholas Pike was actually born literally just up the road from me. So that's kind of exciting, right? There are also some people in this who apparently were in the Dead Zone TV series, but we don't talk about the Dead Zone TV series on this channel anymore, okay? As for the King Easter eggs, well, aside from that talking crow, obviously being a nod to Randall Flagg, and the "We All Shine On" Instant Karma thing that didn't really work, I mean, literally the only other thing I spotted was Cynthia Garris's character, a nurse, being called Annie Wilkes. There wasn't anything else, right? Just kidding. The fucking car. Obviously the car. They made the car Christine. The car isn't Christine in the book. There's no reason to make the car Christine other than it to be a cheap piece of little visual Easter eggs to stick on screen. But, like, we don't need that. We don't need every car in a Stephen King movie to be a red and white Plymouth, okay? Just stop it. Stop it now. Lastly, the ending, or specifically the post-credits scene where we see older Alan being offered a ride by George again and turning him down. That scene literally made me knock off half a star on my Letterboxd rating of this movie. Pathetic. Get in the bin.
filthiest we will die.
You want a ride?
No thanks. I think I'll walk.
Okay, there we go. 19 reasons to watch Riding the Bullet. Not my favourite, as you can tell, but let me know what you think. Are you a fan of this one? And more importantly, how good is David Arquette in this, right? Like, a sea of sparkling wonder in an otherwise pool of festering turds. Let me know what you think. Check the links in the description for my Stephen King quiz book and all of the other things that I usually plug. But most of all, thank you for checking out this video, and I'll hopefully see you again soon. And in fact, why not come back next time, because, dear God, we are checking in to Kingdom Hospital.